There is a specific kind of fear that quietly constructs a psychological cage around the person experiencing it, the paralyzing dread of being looked at. Clinically known as scopophobia, this is an ambient, non-stop security operation. Unlike ordinary stage fright, it demands that a person constantly audit their own existence against a tribunal of imagined judges. It forces a split in consciousness. The mind divides into two disconnected entities, the person attempting to live their life and a hostile critic standing on the outside, watching them live it. On a completely ordinary walk down a street, the brain runs thousands of silent computations. It evaluates whether a stride looks stiff, if the arms swing with natural symmetry, and if a resting facial expression appears acceptable to passersby. This vigilance creates a disconnect from objective reality. A person stops interacting with the physical space they occupy and begins interacting exclusively with their own projection of what the room is thinking about them. We are not born with an instinct to hide. Somewhere along the developmental road, through early experiences of hypercritical judgment or a perfectionist environment, the human eye is weaponized. Being seen becomes linked directly to a loss of safety. Early psychoanalysts attempted to trace the roots of this fear. They proposed a theory of inversion, where a buried desire to be seen and celebrated flips into a profound terror of a devouring eye. Modern psychology confirms the mechanism driving this feeling through the lens of projection. The harsh internal critic, built from those past judgments, is intolerable to hear as your own voice, so the mind beams those verdicts outward. The tired commuter, the busy barista, the colleague on a video call, each become a blank screen. The internal watcher uses their faces as puppets, making you experience your own judgment as theirs. The terrifying stare you feel from a stranger is an echo. Understanding that the critic lives in your own mind doesn't end the fear, but it identifies the correct target. The work shifts from negotiating with the world to renegotiating with your own mind. To dismantle the cage, we have to look at the egocentric distortion it relies on to survive, the spotlight fallacy. In the late 1990s, psychologist Thomas Gilovich and his colleagues conducted studies at Cornell University to measure how accurately we gauge public attention. This data shows the massive gap between perception and reality. While individuals walking into a crowded room believed at least half the people present noticed an embarrassing detail about them, the actual measured reality was a tiny fraction of that. When strangers glance at you on the street, their visual cortex executes a standard evolutionary scan. They are tracking a moving object to avoid physical collision, and within half a second, their brain returns to the film playing inside their own head. Stepping into a public square is not stepping onto a lit stage. The auditorium of judges you imagine is entirely empty. A person living with this fear becomes an inventive tactician of camouflage. They deploy sunglasses, they raise heavy hoods, and smartphones to shrink their footprint, providing about 90 seconds of immediate relief. Every time you survive a public moment behind a shield, your threat system files a false report. By hiding, you deny your amygdala the raw data it needs to discover that the situation is survivable barefaced.
This is called extinction prevention. In the 18th century, Jeremy Bentham designed a prison called the Panopticon, with a central tower to watch inmates at any second. Today, the smartphone camera acts as a digital panopticon. We become our own wardens, monitoring our own broadcast. This framework of internalized surveillance traces back to philosopher Michel Foucault. We become our own wardens, monitoring posture and expression until the surveillance runs entirely on the inside. Every time we hide behind a shield or a screen, we ratify the phobia's core premise, that visibility is a threat, and we are too fragile to endure the world unprotected. For many, the fear of being seen is a physiological ambush called erythrophobia, the acute fear of blushing. Perceiving an unexpected look triggers the sympathetic nervous system, firing a rapid charge of adrenaline. The initial flush of blood to the face is a harmless mammalian reflex. The trap is the secondary wave of panic that hits the moment the mind realizes the body is visibly broadcasting its fear. The instant you feel the heat and panic, a second adrenaline charge fires.
Resisting the sensation prolongs and deepens the flush, providing the loop with the fuel it needs. The exit requires a behavioral practice called radical non-resistance. If you lean into the sensation and invite the blush to burn freely, the secondary panic never fires, and the blood drains back to your core. The exhaustion comes from the war against the body. Ending that conflict allows the physical surge to pass without taking your sovereignty with it. You cannot think your way out of a phobia. The amygdala, the ancient guard dog of the threat system, only processes lived physical evidence. The first step is reversing the inward lock of attention. By deliberately shifting focus outward to catalog the textures, colors, and sounds of a room, you cut off the internal audit. This path uses graduated exposure. By taking small, repeatable physical steps, you methodically stretch your nervous system's safety baseline. The first rung is the 2-second glance. By briefly meeting a stranger's eyes to identify their eye color, you convert a perceived threat into a specific task. The second and third rungs involve sitting unprotected in an open room and then initiating an active, unnecessary exchange with a cashier, graduating from a tolerated object to an active participant. The final rung is the unshielded walk. You cross a public square with empty hands and no camouflage. This allows for the ultimate exposure, deliberately committing a small imperfection and surviving it. Each successful, unshielded minute removes one brick from the cage. It proves to your brain, through raw action, that you are durable enough to be perceived. As the shields come down and exposures accumulate, the sensory landscape itself changes. The intense, mechanical laser of the world's attention begins to scatter. Passing glances on a crowded street no longer register as targeted interrogations. They are just the ambient, neutral weather of a living planet, falling on everything equally. Human beings are wired to read the room, and visibility will always matter. Recovery of power comes from finally deciding exactly whose gaze gets a vote on your worth. Reclaiming the right to occupy space makes visibility safe. It is the end of hiding, and the beginning of a life lived in a world that is waiting to see you.